There are some cultures that can be referred to as people who live outside of time. The Amandawa tribe, living in Brazil, does not have a concept of time that can be measured or counted. Rather, they live in a world of serial events, rather than seeing events as being rooted in time. Researchers also found that no one had an age. Instead, they changed their names to reflect their stage of life and position within their society, so a little child will give up their name to a newborn sibling and take on a new one. In the US we have so many metaphors for time and its passing that we think of time as a thing, that is, the weekend is almost gone, or I haven't got the time. We think such statements are objective, but they aren't. We create these metaphors, but the Amandawa don't talk or think in metaphors for time. The natural world provides a rich source of symbols used in art and literature. Plants and animals are central to mythology, dance, song, poetry, rituals, festivals, and holidays around the world. Different cultures can exhibit opposite attitudes toward a given species. Snakes, for example, are honored by some cultures and hated by others. Rats are considered pests in much of Europe and North America and greatly respected in some parts of India. Of course, within cultures individual attitudes can vary dramatically. For instance, in Britain many people dislike rodents, and yet there are several associations devoted to breeding them, including the National Mouse Club and the National Fancy Rat Club. Paying attention to some people and not others doesn't mean you're being dismissive or arrogant. It just reflects a hard fact: there are limits on the number of people we can possibly pay attention to or develop a relationship with. Some scientists even believe that the number of people with whom we can continue stable social relationships might be limited naturally by our brains. Professor Robin Dunbar has explained that our minds are only really capable of forming meaningful relationships with a maximum of about 150 people. Whether that's true or not, it's safe to assume that we can't be real friends with everyone. While there are many evolutionary or cultural reasons for cooperation, the eyes are one of the most important means of cooperation, and eye contact may be the most powerful human force we lose in traffic. It is, arguably, the reason why humans, normally a quite cooperative species, can become so non-cooperative on the road. Most of the time we are moving too fast, we begin to lose the ability to keep eye contact around 20 miles per hour, or it is not safe to look. Maybe our view is blocked. Often other drivers are wearing sunglasses, or their car may have tinted windows. And do you really want to make eye contact with those drivers? Sometimes we make eye contact through the rear-view mirror, but it feels weak, not quite believable at first, as it is not face-to-face. While driving, people become uncooperative, because they make little eye contact. Many high school students study and learn inefficiently because they insist on doing their homework while watching TV or listening to loud music. These same students also typically interrupt their studying with repeated phone calls, trips to the kitchen, video games, and internet surfing. Ironically, students with the greatest need to concentrate when studying are often the ones who surround themselves with the most distractions. These teenagers argue that they can study better with the TV or radio playing. Some professionals actually support their position. They argue that many teenagers can actually study productively under less than ideal conditions because they've been exposed repeatedly to background noise since early childhood. These educators argue that children have become used to the sounds of the TV, video games, and loud music. They also argue that insisting students turn off the TV or radio when doing homework will not necessarily improve their academic performance. This position is certainly not generally shared, however. Many teachers and learning experts are convinced by their own experiences that students who study in a noisy environment often learn inefficiently. Dorothy was home alone. She was busy with a school project, and suddenly wanted to eat French fries. She peeled 2 potatoes, sliced them up and put a pot with cooking oil on the stove. Then the telephone rang. It was her best friend Samantha. While chatting away on the phone, Dorothy noticed a strange light shining from the kitchen, and then she remembered about the pot of oil on the stove. Dorothy dropped the phone and rushed to the kitchen. The oil was on fire. Chill. Take a deep breath, she said to herself. What did they teach us not to do in a situation like this? Don't try to put it out by throwing water on it, because it will cause an explosion, she remembered. She picked up the pot's lid and covered the pot with it to put out the flames. In the process she burned her hands. Dorothy felt dizzy and sat down at the kitchen table. A couple of minutes later, her parents came rushing into the house. Samantha had suspected that something might be wrong after Dorothy dropped the phone just like that, and she had phoned Dorothy's parents. Dorothy started to cry. Her mother hugged her tightly and looked at the wound. Tell me what happened, she said. Dorothy told her, sobbing and sniffing. Aren't you going to yell at me? She asked them through the tears. Her father answered with a smile, I also put my lid on to keep me from exploding. Dorothy looked at him, relieved. But be careful not to be so irresponsible again. A while later, after the wound had been treated, the family sat around the kitchen table and talked. I learned a big lesson today, Dorothy said. Her parents expected her to say something about the fire. But she talked about something different. I have decided to use kind words more just like you. Her parents were very grateful, because Dorothy had quite a temper.